We're here at the Norfolk Tattoo Expo in Norfolk, Virginia. Tattoo artist Doug the Thug from California. Doug, thanks, man. Much appreciated.
How you doing?
How long you been tattooing for, Doug?
About 50-something years, like 1972.
Who'd you apprentice under?
I met Howie the Hand in L.A. at a shop Philadelphia Eddie had. Him and Asa Lee Crow. Me and my friend were down there getting a tattoo. Then I seen him in the valley where I live, and he told me he was working for Doc Dog in Van Nuys. So I said, oh, I'll come see you one time. So I went and seen him. You know, we used to talk about tattooing and whatever. And then one day he was telling me, this guy come in and said something about a bike. I didn't pay attention. And then he told me when the guy left, yeah, I'm going to trade him a starter kit for tattooing for the bike. And I go, what's the chip on the bike? And it was like a basket, no number, no case with the numbers.
Right. No matching numbers.
Yeah, it was, it was a hot bike. And I told him, well, why would you want that stove bike? I go, I got a bitchin' bike and it's legal, but I'd want to learn a tattoo with the starter kit. And then I said, I'll bring it by later today or the next day, whatever. I brought it by and it was real custom and, he liked it, but it was a Triumph, a real chopper rigid frame, custom painted. Really, me and my friend Tinker built it. So he said, yeah. I gave him the bike that night. He gives me the kit with the flash and everything. He tells me, now don't tattoo. I did one tattoo on my leg, a little spider, right?
Right.
No, but he in front of him.
Right.
Right. And then he tells me, take it, but don't tattoo. And I go, okay. And I leave and I go to my friends, my two friends, tattoo me. No. Okay, so I'm tattooing. I don't know what I'm doing, And it looked pretty decent, though. So then I go back the next day, and my lesson started. And then Doc Dog owns the shop. So I actually got taught by Howie the Hand, Sailor Barney's son.
Okay.
They called him Sailor Barnery Junior. And so Dog gave me the name Howie the Hand. So I started apprentice and everything. And then I started working a few months later. I don't really remember how long. I did it one time, but it's been a long time. One day he calls me. I'm in the shop, and he gets a phone call. And then when he hangs up, he goes, Doug, you want to go to work at a shop in San Pedro? I go, why? What's up? And he goes, well, Gene Hall, he was Leroy's apprentice. Leroy Mersham, or I don't pronounce it right, but he was on the Pike for years. Owen Jensen's partner. They had a shop together. He says he opened a shop in San Pedro, and the guy he brought from New York to work it, he comes in and finds him all loaded on heroin. So he ran him off. So I said, yeah, and I went down there and worked for him for a while. And then I ended up buying the shop. He took a lot of stuff out of it, but he told me what went with it and what didn't, And I got a bunch of old flash. Jerry swallowed some flash from him and some other odds and ends. And then I worked there for a few years, and then I closed that down. I asked somebody, was it Tennessee Dave maybe, you need anybody at the Pike? And he didn't need nobody at that time. And then I lived in the valley, and in Van Nuys, Jim had a shop, and it was closed for California. Ralph used to work there, and for some reason he went somewhere else. It was closed for about a week. So I called downtown and I talked to Tennessee Dave, and he goes, well, yeah, Jim wants a artist there. Come down tomorrow if you got any pictures of your work or something. So I took a friend of mine I had some work on, and he hired me. He goes, Sullivan's going to open it tomorrow. Meet him there at noon or whatever time he said. So I went there and I started working there for a long time. Then he goes, I think you should work on the Pikes. Leave about 4 o'clock on a Friday and go to the Pike. So I went down and worked with Greg James. There were like 7 other artists or 8 in there. And at 362, that was like Shaw's was here, Leroy's was here, and 362 was here. And so I worked there for a while on the weekends all the time. Van Nuys in there on the weekends. Then he opened a shop at the other end of the Pike called Trade Winds. And then Fat Steve, I forget, they call him Sailor Steve in the business. He used to work on 5th and Main and at the Pike for Captain Jim. They had some falling out. Captain Jim told him to go work at 362. And he asked me if I wanted to manage that shop. I said, yeah. So I went down to the Pike and I managed that shop for a long time we got in an altercation one night. Then I just got out of jail and moved back to Van Nuys working. I didn't want to be at the Pike. And then I worked for him for a lot, to like, God, from the 75 or 6 probably, to, I went back to Van Nuys and I worked for him to 84.
Okay.
The rent went up and he wouldn't pay $750 or something. And then he went and opened a shop in Pacoima. And then I didn't work for him no more at that point. I opened a shop on 5th Street right by at Main, and I worked there for a while. And then I didn't like it because it was a skid row. You had to be on your toes, and you fought all the time, and you carried a couple guns.
Let me ask you a question real quick. The shop at 362, what was the name of that shop?
Long Beach Tattoo.
Okay, because I actually did an episode on the Pike. And to be honest with you, it was really hard to get information on the different shops that were in the area because Burt Grimm's shop pretty much overshadowed the information I could find.
Right, because they were more publicity-wise. Captain Jim was more quiet.
Gotcha.
You know, Greg James would know a lot about that. You know what I'm saying? Well, then I'm working there for a while, and then I go back to Van Nuys, and then Captain Jim opens another shop, and right across the street, it used to be a bumper car or someplace. He bought that property it was on the Pike, and 362 was there, and he was there, and he had a brand new shop built and everything. And then he didn't know they were closing the Pike down at the time, or he wouldn't have did it. Then him and his wife got a divorce, and she wanted the LA shop, which was 5th and Main. Tennessee Dave worked there, and it was a moneymaker, you know, a real moneymaker. And so he told the lawyer, no, I don't want her to have the shop in Long Beach, right? The new one. Then she wanted it, you know what I'm saying?
So worked. She didn't want it until he wanted it.
Right.
Gotcha.
So now she got that, and the Pike pretty much closed down, but there were still some tattoo business. In 362, he moved out and moved in there. And then Colonel Todd actually opened it up and called it the Rose. And then Mark Mahoney worked there. This was around 79 or maybe around 80, somewhere right there. More like 80, I think. Captain Jim's old lady got it, and I don't know. It closed down. She didn't have it too long. I worked in East LA for Jim. One night my dad was sick in the hospital. It was a Saturday night or a Friday night. And I called Captain Jim and said, I'm going to the hospital. And he goes, if you leave, you're fired. So take your shit. And I figured, well, my dad's real sick. Sorry about that, but I'm going.
Yeah, right. And family first.
Right. So I went down to the hospital. My dad, I think, died the next day or something. But, you know, I got to see him before he died. He died a day or two later, right? So then I'm figuring out what to do. Jim calls and talks to my brother at my house. I don't know this. And then my brother, after he got off the phone and everything, he goes, Captain Jim apologized. He didn't know Dad was that sick, and he wants you to go back to work. And I said, okay. And then when I called him and asked him what's up, he said, I really apologize. I didn't think your dad was that sick.
He just thought you were using it as an excuse.
Well, maybe, you know, or just he had the flu or something. So, you know, but me and Jim got along good. He was a character. He did a lot for the business nobody knows about. Like, they all went to Sacramento one time and paid money when they were trying to outlaw it. But he wasn't in the limelight. Like, Shaw was more in the limelight, right? I worked there for a while. Then I went to L.A. and opened that shop, and I was there a long time. And then Captain Jim, I wanted to go get out of downtown. It was too wild. He said, I'll buy that shop, but I don't want nothing in it but the sink or whatever. Like, take all the flash and all that. And he goes, but I want the sign out front, you know? He said so much. We agreed on a price. And he goes, and you can go back to work in Van Nuys. Well, I know I used to fly back to North Carolina, Jacksonville, North Carolina on the weekends and work for Zeke Owens, you know, because it's a marine town, paydays. I'd go on paydays. You'd leave, you'd spend money partying, the motel and everything, and you'd still leave with $4 or $5 grand.
Wow.
You know, the money was there.
Was he knocking out that much work on a weekend? I mean, you had like, how many tattoos do you think you would do on a weekend?
I don't know. A lot, but they were more expensive, so that made it.
Okay.
You know, I worked there for a while. On pay weekends, I flew back and forth. And then Jeff the Jew was in Havelock, North Carolina, probably an hour away. So then I used to go work for Jeff, and one time Jeff called me up and said, "You want to come back here and work for a while?" And I go, "Yeah." I moved back there and worked there. And then I opened a shop in 92 in Jacksonville, North Carolina, where Zeke was. But Zeke was on that side of town, and I was over here where no shops were.
Okay.
And there were a few shops like Zeke. At one time, it was all on Court Street, all the tattoo shops. I had that shop for, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 years. My son was graduating, and I want to go back to L.A. where he could go to school. I think I put an ad in National, and Jack Armstrong and Susie McCavey from Galveston, Texas, but Jack was from all over. You heard of him, I'm sure. And they came, and they ended up buying the shop.
Okay.
So then I went back to California. My son went to school, and I opened a shop on Hollywood Boulevard, upstairs. I should have rented the building a block away downstairs. Would have made more money. So people don't like to go upstairs.
Yeah.
In tattooing. Maybe now, but
well,
not
I
then.
think because back then you different time. You know what I mean?
They thought you'd get hurt, robbed, or whatever. But when I went to the Pike to get tattooed when I was a kid, there was that 362 shop, and there was a guy named Jimbo, a big old dude. He was a little partners with the manager of it with Captain Jim. Like you say, it was kind of. I was young. It was kind of scary, like you know, and. Then later I got to know them, and they were cool. You know, they weren't bullies. You know, they could be, but they weren't. I had a little shop. Mickey Mouse Mike owned Extreme Motorsport. It was a bike shop. And he said, "You got to put a tattoo shop in that room there." So I went in there, and I worked there for a while. And then there was a guy named Tim Whalen. He opened up 5150 Tattooing, right? And he got Harry the Jew, Harry the Super Jew. He tattooed Danny Trejo's, that girl on his chest.
Okay.
And he even says in interviews who did it when they were in San Quentin or one of them. I think it was San Quentin. No, not San Quentin. The other one, Folsom, or I forget, one of them prisons, right? And he did that tattoo. So I worked there for a while. I worked for Tim right up until I left and went to Texas for Susie. Susie needed some help. She had some flake people that were dragging the place down, and worked for her. And then she filtered them people out, and we got some good people. And I worked there, and my son learned to pierce, and he was going to start maybe working for her because she pierced, you know, but he was going to work a little part-time, and you know how I work into it more. And then there was a place called Bad Boys up the street on Seawall. And originally it was this guy named California Jimmy. Baba knows his last name, and his dad. And then there was this John that worked there for a while. And then the guy got in a wreck with some club or something, some people, and John got him out of it. And then John told him, "You know, if you get in a wreck again, I can't get you out." And he goes, "You know, I'll buy the shop from you if you want to go somewhere." But he offered him so much money, I forget, and he sold it to him. And then he had it for years. Every night I drove by to go home, and there was a little white piece of paper like this on the bottom of the window by the door. And I went, "What's that? I wasn't there the other day." And I drove around and said, "For rent." So Susie's building was owned by the people that owned that building. And Miss Dung, and she worked she had a liquor store next to Susie's shop. So the next day I go to work, she's there. I go, "Hey, what's the deal on the shop?" She goes, John wants to get out of the lease, so he wants me to rent it or somebody rent it." And I go, "Well, I think I want to rent it, but I want to look in it." So I go down there, I look in it, I tell him I want it. Still have flash on the wall and everything. John didn't take that out till the last day of the month. So I rented that. Since it was a tattoo shop, we just put a sign. You know, we taped the windows up and put a sign, "Closed for remodeling." It's been a tattoo shop since 92, so, you know, it was established. And then we took it over and changed it from Bad Boys to American Dragon Tattoo. And then we're still there. Yeah, my son pretty much runs it. Hollywood Keith, he goes by.
So let me ask you a question. You know, I was introduced to you by Baba as Doug the Thug. Right. You also go by Tattoo Doug.
Yeah.
I mean,
when I first started tattooing, Doc Dog used to call me Doug the Bug
Okay.
because I bugged him until I got taught to tattoo.
That's awesome.
Jeff the Jew called me that, and his daughter will still call me that. Well, I got the name Doug the Thug is I had the shop across from Captain Jim, and Tennessee Dave ran it, right? And you couldn't take no shit down there. I'd throw people out, and then they'd bet lunch on when I'd throw the first person out that day or something, right? And then when I got that name, it just stuck. But see, I didn't really like it because then everybody thought I was a bad guy or something. But in them days, everybody was bad. Or
So what I like, let's get into some of that though. Like, how do you feel about how it changed from when you started in 71 up until now, where now the shops are more appealing to, let's say, younger crowd, females,
well, we
different.
did a lot of females back in the 70s and 80s, early 80s.
Yeah, and I get that, but the shops feel different.
Yeah, but listen, here's the deal. A lot of the people now that are tattooing, they don't give a fuck about the history or who's who at the zoo. It's just like, basically, fuck you, I'm making money, leave me alone. And that's very disrespectful, I think, okay,
Right.
to the trade. And then to some artists, too. Like, when they say that, it disrespects everybody, I think. But some of them kids want to know the history. You know what I'm saying? So it ain't everybody. But what blows my mind is, when I first met Cliff Raven, when he moved to Hollywood and got that shop from on Sunset Boulevard, got it from Lyle Tuttle, and Tuttle's son was running it. I thought everything he drew come out of his head, right? And I'm trying to draw, and I'm like, oh, shit. And he goes, do you think it all comes out of my head, dude? And I go, don't it? And he goes, in a way, but no. He goes, the Oriental things? Go down to Little Tokyo in L.A. and get them calendars and stuff, right? They're just like they were on bamboo and they were dragging, fighting a tiger or whatever. And then, I went and did that. And then, you draw it and change it or whatever, but you had something to go by. That was the key deal.
So you had something to kick it off.
Right.
And then you altered and did what you wanted. Gotcha.
Or just copied it plain if somebody wanted it just exactly. So then that helped me. I worked for Cliff Raven for a little while when my son was first born, but that's when he had the shop for a couple of years, maybe even longer. And he just worked himself, appointment only, and he was a famous guy that, could stay busy all the time. And then they decided they're losing so much money, they need to put artists in there. So I went there and I worked a little while, but I was working for Captain Jim and Van Ice making serious money. But I messed up by not doing that. I would have had to stay and build up a clientele. But my son was just born, and I was making a lot of money at the other place. And I told him, I hate to disrespect you, but my son's just born. I need money. And I go, I don't have time to sit here and build up a clientele. I'm making good money there. He goes, we understand.
Yeah.
No problem. And then years later, I was going to go back to work for him. Somebody that worked for him told lies about me that I was on dope and strung out and shit. Jealousy, that was. I hate jealousy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like myself, I always said, I wish that person the best of luck. Well, jealousy is they envy you.
There you go.
You know what I mean? I don't want to say who it was. I'd like to, but so I don't know this. And years later, I'm at 29 Palms after Raven sold the shop, and I visited him, and his partner or buddy or whatever he was.
Yeah, Pierre.
Well, it was Peter Marshall's his real name. But when they were trying to get tattooing as an art with this guy from UCLA, a professor, it became Bob Raven, his brother, to where nothing would
turn back to with the relationship.
Well, no, the thing is it wouldn't put no bad words about tattooing. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
I think they were lovers.
I did an episode on Cliff, and if you want to see that episode, you can click here. But yeah, that's
You know what I mean? They were
yeah,
real good people. I mean, you couldn't have had no better of a person in the business than Cliff and Peter Marshall or Bob Raven.
from my understanding was is that they really kind of were low key about it, and it was like the people that needed to know knew, the other people didn't know.
But no matter what he was a great person.
Yeah, it didn't
You know what
matter.
I mean? It didn't matter, right?
Right.
He was just a great dude. When I went out to visit him, they said, "You're not strung out no more." I go, "Who told you that? I done drugs, but I never been strung out on nothing." So that was flat ass lie. And he told me, and I go, "Huh." But then when Raven was selling the shop, I wish I knew it a week ahead of time. I told my friend, I heard Raven selling a shop for 50 grand. He goes, "Call him up and we'll go buy it." So I call him up, "Hey, Cliff, the shop's still for sale." He goes, "Oh, I just made a deal with Robert Benedetti today to sell it to him." And I go, "Did he pay you cash? We got 50 grand. We'll be there in 10 minutes. And he goes, "No, he didn't, but I can't
Yeah, you can't go
do
back.
that. I gave him my word." I go, "I understand, but if for any reason it falls through or anything, call me." And then he went to 29 Palms, told everybody he was going to retire. "If you want your work finished, you got a year." And then he passed away.
Now, what would you say like your style of tattooing? Are you typical street guy, street shop guy that does whatever comes in the door? Do you kind of like to focus on, let's say, American traditional or Japanese?
Well, my theory was anything you're paying for.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I like the Japanese, but Japanese in them days weren't that popular in the regular shops. It was like Ed Hardy in Frisco, Cliff Raven in Hollywood. There were very few people that did that kind of work. And
Yeah.
then later, Bob Roberts, got into it.
And Don Nolan,
Well, Don Nolan was in it from the
beginning.
back,
Yeah.
right? And
It was
and
Hardy,
then
Nolan, and Raven, right? They were like
right,
the big
and then
three.
Don Nolan had a brother. I thought it was the brother, unless he was cousin, but I'm pretty sure it was a brother. But don't hold me to it. You could find out. And he worked on the Pike with Bob Shaw. But see, Don Nolan worked on the Pike first for Captain Jim, and then went to Shaw. I had a couple sheets of flash of his, drew back in them, and I sold one to Mark Mahoney when I was trying to get some money to go back to Texas again after
Yeah.
the hurricane. And I was sort of down at that time, and I went and seen Mark, and Mark goes, "Yeah, I'm showing him the drawings," and he didn't buy the real super old ones, like from the 50s and 40s, but he bought all these ones I had from the 70s, right? That were from, what's his name? Because I think from Leroy's apprentice, Gene Hall, I think he wanted, because that's the era he came into tattooing, and he bought them, and I got some money to go back, and he sort of hyped me, and he goes, "Yeah, you ought to go back and work for her," you know? And I was sort of feeling down. He pepped me up, and me and my kid went back there, and we worked, and then we got this shop. Like, I seen Mark Mahoney in July. He's a stand-up dude. He always has been.
He's smooth, man.
Oh,
He's a
he is.
smooth son of
He,
a bitch, dude.
but he's got a new shop now because the one building the lease was up or something. I don't really know. But it's really beautiful, and it's more by appointment only. But Asa Lee Crow, did you know who he was?
I do not.
He was a tattooer out of Houston, Texas, I believe, but he traveled all over. And when he got older, he looked like Colonel Sanders. You ever see
Oh
a
yeah,
picture
yeah,
of that? He worked for Doc Dog and Van Nuys. He tattooed this on me years ago, and then he tattooed something on a girl on my back. And then Dog says he fired him more than anybody, and
yeah.
but he was a good dude. And then his son works for Asa Lee Junior or whatever. I forget what they call him. And he works for Mahoney, and he works somewhere else, both places. And he's a real good people. Mahoney was always a stand-up, respectful person.
Yeah.
And then when I saw him that flash, he goes like this. I told him the the Nolan flash, the piece I wanted $1,500 for, right? Because I figured, I said I'd always sell it if anybody give me $1,000, right? I copied it. I got a copy of it, but the original, maybe I shouldn't have sold it, but it was just collecting dust and stuff. So it's on the wall in his shop. And so I I tell him that, and he goes, "I'd give you 1,200." And I go, "Okay," and I'll throw in a tattoo. Well, I'm just thinking something little or whatever. And then when he's paying me, he goes, "You know, my thing's portraits." And I go, "You do a portrait on me?" And he ain't gonna charge me, you know what I mean? And he goes, "I'd be honored to." That made me feel cool.
Yeah.
And then I said, "I got a picture of my mom and dad that I always thought would be a bitchin' tattoo." And he goes, "Bring it in." And then I got it on my leg.
Oh, wow.
He's a hell of a tattoo artist. The least painful tattoo I ever had in my life.
Really?
Yeah, it only
Super
hurt
light.
in one spot when it hit some nerve or something, sort of. Yeah, super light. Just a hell of a dude, right? And he did that 12, 12, 12 is when he did it.
Wow.
And my mom was still alive. She was probably 100. She died 105 and a half in 2019, but she was still pretty coherent and everything then. She sent him a Christmas card and goes, "I love the tattoo," and that just blew his mind, you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now we have all these guys that you worked with that were just dudes that you worked with that now are like held on this like high esteem now because they're really legends.
Well, see, you know, when I told you Cliff Raven, I should have stayed there, but see, money was the object, and I had a young baby, so, you know, it was,
We've all had those
you know, it
decisions
was
in life,
different.
yeah.
But see, if I would have stayed there, I'd be like Greg James now, more known. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you know what, man?
I made a lot of money in my lifetime.
The thing is there's times where in your life you got to do what you got to do what's best for you. You know what I mean? And
Right.
you don't think about shit like that. You're
Right.
you
I never thought about
when,
that.
especially when you're talking about taking care of family. You,
Right.
you become real short-sighted because that's what I got to focus on, right? But for me, I guess where I was kind of going with the question is like, you know, all those people, you worked with them, you were friends with them, and it's like, for somebody like myself that can only read about them, or
Well, me and Greg James worked at 362, and it was a cartoon act. He carried a gun right here. I used to carry a little Derringer in my pocket and another gun here. And when I had my own shop, there was a shotgun here under a blanket or something.
and the
But
Pike was really that bad. I mean,
Pike was crazy.
because I
dude.
know when I did the episode on the Pike, I talked about Owen Jensen, you know, basically getting jumped and they stabbed
They
him.
robbed him. I thought they
Yeah.
hit him on the head. Well, he ended up dying from that.
Yeah, like a couple years later, but he did die from it.
Well, yeah, but
And-
it all was stemmed from that.
And the thing is from what I understood of that situation was he always carried a Derringer, so they must have caught him when he didn't have it on him,
Or they knew about it.
or they knew about
And
it.
they banged him before he could get to it. Right.
Exactly.
He was a real nice guy. Now, Leroy was he was a nice guy too, but he was ornery. You know what I mean? More of a bully
Every picture
type.
I've seen of him, he looks like he's like, you know what I mean? Like,
But he wasn't, everybody was a little grouchy then or more negative or whatever. You know, it's like if you ask too many questions, they didn't want. It's like that on the wall. You want it or not. Leroy, there was a parking lot on the Pike over there, and there was this thing that you lifted up, and I don't think you had to pay, but Leroy would charge people, go over there, raise the thing up, charge them a
Jesus,
couple
man.
bucks to park there, you know. But Jeff the Jew, when he worked at the Pike, Leroy liked to drink. So he'd buy him a bottle of vodka, you know, about 6 o'clock or something on a Friday, where he'd get so fucked up he had to quit tattooing, where the people wouldn't go to him. But Owen Jensen now, Gene Hall, that I got that one shop in San Pedro off of, he was Leroy's apprentice, and he was real good friends with, you know, Owen Jensen. And he took care of Owen Jensen till he died, like went to the house every day,
wow.
make sure he fed him and everything.
see, and that's the stuff that somebody like me that's doing the history stuff, we don't have those little tidbits of information because that's
Well,
stuff
a lot
that,
of people, like the only people that might have knew that was Leroy and Owen and Gene.
Yeah.
You know, and Gene, he was a character. Worldwide Needles was in England, and they made every like Greg something James needles. I forget the names now, but they were like all the needles were the same, but they were packaged under different ones, and it used to blow my mind when people would go, "I like the blah blah needles better than the blah blah,"
And they're
or
the
they
same.
were the same thing, just had a different label.
Wow.
Okay, but he turned me on to, you can buy them over there for like $7 or $8 a thousand. And when you buy them somewhere that was just about when National opened. I don't know if Spalding was already open. Yeah, I think they were. But it's when National first opened. So I'm getting needles from England for years. And then the last time I think I bought them, they were $20 or something. I buy like five. They come in 1,000 packages. I buy like 5,000 at a time. And then one time, Jeff the Jew gives Joe Kaplan the number, the phone number, and says Doug buys it there. And he calls up and they won't sell them to him, right? And then the dude says, he dropped my name. Well, you're selling to Doug, blah, blah. The next time I went to order them, they wanted to sell them to me. By then, they didn't want to really sell them to individuals. They wanted to sell them to
distributor or
worldwide.
suppliers.
There was a needle company, I forget what it's called. It's probably still in New York. I can't think of the name of it. And they wrote me a letter that I had to go there from now on. So now they went from 12 or $20 to $40 or something. I still got like 5,000 of them somewhere. They started making needles, but they weren't no good. But TCM, Worldwide Needle, they listened to people and told people, tell me this, tell me that. And then they got to make good needles. And I use them to this day because they're always right on the money. You look at them, they're never. I found one bad needle in like 30 years. You know what I mean?
Can't beat
They're
that.
really quality. But now there's probably 500 companies that make needles. And then the cartridges come out.
Yeah.
Right? I never used cartridges. I don't even know. I mean, Jeff the Jew gave me a rotary machine. You got to use cartridges with it. Cheyenne, I forget what it's called. And he gave me a bunch of disposable cartridge tubes. Most people use the same tube and just change the tip. He thought like me, sometimes a germ or some fluid could get up past that O-ring or whatever. And I noticed a lot of artists put a piece of plastic there to where it'll stop it, a double safety. He gave me a Lance NATO rotary, and it's made from a dentist company in Russia. And they tell you right in the literature they send with the machine, do not use cartridges, use regular needle bars and tubes. They can be disposable, the tube. It don't have to be metal. That machine's different. It's a magnetic rotary, so it has some give. It goes sort of more like this, like a regular tattoo machine. Where the other ones, they can hurt people. You overwork it, because Cliff Raven, there was a Lynx tattoo machine in the 60s and 70s, and they were in England. And they were about this big, a round motor, and then it was a flat plate, and the needle ran through there, and your tube fit here. And he tattooed the back of my arm with it, right? He was starting to use it. And then my arm turned purple.
Oh.
You know what I mean? It bruised it.
Just beating the shit out of it.
Well, it hits hard. So next time I go to Raven, I say, you don't use the rotary no more? He goes, no. He goes, did your arm turn purple? And I go, well, by the way, yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah. He told me that a rotary, a coil, it'll go like this and have a little give. A rotary's like this, all the way, no give, till it straightens out and then comes back. So he goes, it's really easy to damage the skin. So he couldn't use them, and then what was it, maybe 40 or 50 years later, they came out. Somebody figured out the dental tool could be used as a tattoo machine.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And then they were buying a middleman and then everybody in the world copied them. I use a rotary a little, playing with it, but you know what? It puts in, like, if you do this with a coil machine, you only got to do that. Plus, it's real easy to overwork the skin with a coil.
So let me ask you, not
a coil, a rotary, excuse me.
What do you think of the Norfolk convention?
Oh, that's great. A lot of
first time here?
Yeah. I mean, I drove through on the freeway, by it, but no, I never been in Virginia.
I mean, it's my first time being here at Norfolk. You've probably been in way more conventions and stuff than I have, but I do some conventions here and there, and this has to be one of my favorites because of the people that are here.
Oh yeah, that's why. Like Gil didn't come, he had some problem, and then I heard Freddie Negrete didn't come, he had some deal or something. But there are some people that I ain't seen in 20 years and stuff. And like Crow that put it on, I only met him one time at a convention, maybe twice, but I only remember once. He always been a great dude.
Yeah.
I remember he come out, I call it the first flash that you could buy to hang on your wall. But Raven had about these color flash. It was on film, like, like a camera picture. So I don't know if he took pictures of it and had it printed or however, but it was hard to get shit printed in them days in color. So they were real cool. They were like 6 or 8 sheets. At the time, they were $35 a sheet. But then Crow come out with a whole big, huge set. You know what I mean? He thought about it and figured this a moneymaker. And I remember buying 500 sheets from him when I had the shop in Pacoima. Oh, it was about 87, 86 is when I bought it. I bought a bunch of it. And then he had a thing with the T-shirts with my mom something, and You Bet It Hurts, and they had old school designs. And then he prints your name on the back, right? So I bought a bunch of them shirts from my shop with the name on the back, and it was a good price, and they were good quality. I still probably got a couple somewhere, but it's funny, like, if you go to the clubhouse in the valley, my friend Sal that died, we got a picture up there of him by his fender, and he's got one of them tattoo shirts on.
Nice.
It's funny. Yeah, Crow did a lot for the business. There's a lot of people here that a lot of history.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of young kids are real respectful.
That want to be a part of it. They want to embrace the history of it. And that's where...
That's faded away a lot.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to do my best to try to turn that back on.
No, but I'm saying a lot of people are doing that. But there was a kid, I forget his name, he's from New Mexico, and he does that Ghetto Art Day, like Mexican art, Good Time Charlie type stuff, Mark Mahoney, you know, the old Cholo stuff, he does all that, and he has some amazing drawings, right? I was talking to him, and he's real respectful for the business, and he liked to hear, I told him some stories about the old first needle, single needle. Who made that famous and into the limelight it is now was Good Time Charlie, Jack Rudy, okay, a guy named Mike something. He always wore them flowery shirts buttoned up to the top. God, I forget his name. But he worked in East LA with Mahoney and him, Mark Mahoney, and then Freddie Negretti came later.
Yeah.
They were teaching at that time. He become a hell of an artist, that dude.
Yeah, for sure.
Mark Mahoney helped him a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're the ones that brought it into the limelight in East LA, and then a snowball from that. What amazes me now is that people come in with a phone. I want this tattoo. And when they first started doing that, I go, oh yeah, it's right over there. And they go, no, it's not. It's different. It's different. And they wouldn't even look, and then I just shut up because, we can do that.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, by the phone it's better or worse.
I'm starting to see a resurgence of flash on the wall.
Well, at this show, I seen people selling old flash, right? And I got a bunch of old flash. And one time I went to a convention, and I saw a couple sets or sheets or whatever, right? And they didn't seem to, only certain people wanted it.
Right.
But now I think I'm going to print some more up because I think everybody would want it now.
They would. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, it seems to be like, not only is it a resurgence in the shops, but I think there's more people collecting.
Well, see, somebody made a stencil book one time, 10, 15, probably 15 years or longer ago. I forget who it was. Might have been for Sailor Jerry's stencils. I can't remember. But it was a blue-covered book. And I went, wow, that's a good idea. So I took the stencils. I used them in L.A. and the Pike and everywhere, right? I got bags of them. You had to get a license in L.A., and it was a license, and that you had to go there with, like, one of them pictures out of them photo booths, and you had to have 2 pictures. They kept one stapled to your license. You stapled the other to the license you hung on the wall. Or somebody else, I guess notoriously they were sharing the license at the Pike, because in 76 or 7 it was $300 the last time I bought one, or maybe the last few times. It was expensive in them days. So I guess they'd share them. That's what the mugshot came along for. And then I put that on the cover, my license from the Pike, and I put Pike Designs. And I sold books pretty well. But I had about 5 or 6 left, and I was going to bring them, and then I just spaced out and forgot.
I tell you what, if you start putting them back together, you're going to sell them like hotcakes, man.
Well, I'm going to print some more of them, and then I wish I would have brought them here. I would have sold them out. But I'm going to start doing some shows with Baba, and then I'm going to make some more, and I think I'm going to make a second copy, Yeah, them stencils are crazy. Pat Martinick, you know who he was?
Yeah, Picture Machine.
Right. His grandson gave me one of his stencils. His grandson's in Reno.
Yeah, Jesse.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Crazy dude, but he's all
respectful as could be.
Hell yeah. I love his stuff, man. He does some crazy shit on Instagram.
But he's got that
he's always got the damn jumpsuits on.
Yeah, they look like for the pajamas.
He looks like a pimp, dude. When I met him the first time, he had the crazy jumpsuit on and he had gold fucking slippers on, and I was like, and then Baba goes, well, that's Pat Martinick's grandson, and I go, no way, and he said, yeah, man, and I go,
and then
dude,
his dad was Guy.
Yeah,
his dad, Grandpa and Dad opened the shop in Reno, but Guy ran it,
Yeah.
And Pat got sick and died.
I know, man, that you got a ton of people you want to talk to today, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this with me, man. Awesome to meet you. I'm super amped that Baba introduced me to you.
Well, the fame and all that, I sometimes shied away from it, but probably that hurt me in business. But business never hurt. I always made money wherever I was.
Doug, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so
too.
much.
I'm glad to meet you.
I know we could sit here and rap for hours, but I want you to make sure that you get your time to hang out with people you're friends with. Well,
we can do something later, too.
For sure, man. For sure.